Yes, I'm not Carlos, but I'm going to fill in for him here because he's not a video guy and I'm not either. But I can tell a story because I was there to help Carlos. He had this problem show up in his shop, and so he called me and I worked with him to get it fixed. And so let's go ahead and look at this. Now, this is a case study from February of 2019 on ScanShare.io. Every month, ScanShare has a case study done by some local technicians. The primary purpose of ScanShare, though, is to share scan data. It's a database scan data to share it, and it makes it easy to do that. And so we'll be walking through it here so you can see how it works. All right, so let's look at this shop of this car, this truck that showed up at Carlos's shop. 2005 Jeep Grand Cherokee with a 4.7 liter engine. It showed up with a check engine light on and a hesitation on acceleration. Another shop had been working on it, and so he opened the hood and looked it over. And he could see this awesome 4.7 staring back at him. Now, what he's really doing here is looking for what we call witness marks. He's looking for signs that somebody who did not belong in there was there. And so he didn't see that. It looked pretty clean, nothing, ripped up or whatnot. So he moved on from there, and in talking to the customer, he found out that another shop had replaced all 4 oxygen sensors. So his next step was to check for codes. And when he did, he found 2, a P0153 O2 sensor, Bank 2 sensor 1 slow response, and a PO300 multiple cylinder misfire. Now, at the time, it wasn't misfiring, but he did feel a hesitation when he took it for a test drive. He is now showing movie data from his test drive. So let me explain. Working with Carlos, I have impressed on him that you get a car in for a problem, you want to test drive it. And you want to test drive it for a couple things. One, the customer has their complaint, whatever it is, runs rough, has misfire, whatever. But you need to know, does it shift? Does the transmission shift? Does it feel like the exhaust is restricted? Whatnot. You need to drive it. Now, if you're going to drive it, you might as well hook up your scan tool and capture data, because the data will be very important. Now, many technicians just either refuse to do this or don't know how to do this, but I suspect the biggest reason why it's not done is because many technicians don't know how to analyze the data. So Carlos took this out for a drive to verify the customer's complaint, make sure that it didn't need a transmission or have an engine knock or whatever. And while he was out, he captured the data. Now, ScanShare by default loads, in this case study format, loads the first 4 PIDs in the data list. And so we can open up the data list, and these are all the PIDs that he decided to capture. Now, he didn't look at the data so much because he really didn't know what to look at, but he did what I'd asked him to do, and that is, if you're going to call me for help, or you think you're going to call me for help, I want a data capture, because I want to look at some data instead of fighting with feel and touch and smell and whatnot. So we have this. All right, now he's driven the car, and now the customer is like pacing around. He doesn't want to leave the car for Carlos to diagnose properly. He wants something right now, and he wants to not pay any diagnostic fee. He wants him to hook up his magic machine that scans the car, and the computer tells him what part to replace. Well, that tool, that magic tool, doesn't exist. Scan tools there's a lot of power inherent to a scan tool and scan data, but it has to be understood by a knowledgeable technician. So this guy just wants something done, and he doesn't want to pay for diagnosis, and Carlos is just wanting to get this thing out of his stall. So he suggested, well, you had this, slow sensor response code and misfire. Let's just replace both upstream O2 sensors, because I don't know what's on the car now. I don't know where it came from and such. I don't know if it's the right application or whatever. And you can pay just for the sensors and the labor to put them on, and you can go away and hopefully not come back. So the customer liked that, and so he put the 2 upstream sensors on from sensors from down the street at from a local parts shop or store. And the guy left, and then a week later, the car comes back. And so it not only did not fix the problem, but now he has 5 stored codes along with the hesitation. So I guess you can either say it's getting worse or we're getting more information because we have 5 codes. So now we have a PO155 O2 sensor, bank 2 sensor 1 heater performance. We have a P1128 and P1129. Those are closed loop fueling not achieved for both banks. Then we have a PO135 O2 sensor, bank 1 sensor 1 heater performance, and a PO161 O2 sensor, bank 2 sensor 2 heater performance. So we've got a bunch of codes saying there's something wrong with the O2 sensor's response. So Carlos is pretty sure that replacing more sensors isn't going to fix anything. So he recommended that the customer leave the vehicle for him to check it out properly, and that yes, there's going to be a diagnostic charge. And the customer reluctantly agreed, but he agreed and went away. Now, a short time later, before Carlos had really had time to even start on this thing, because he's got a shop full of cars, the customer called back and told him that he wanted the ECM reflashed with an update. Now, apparently he had been watching YouTube videos and doing Google searches for his problem, because this guy does not want to pay for a diagnosis. And so, Carlos can't do a flash, and he asked me about it, and I told him I can't do a flash for this. I don't have the equipment. And so I said, why don't you call and see if there's a mobile technician out in your area that can flash this thing and get a price from him. So he did so, and he called the customer up and said, look, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars to flash the ECM. Can't guarantee anything. This is your diagnosis. The customer agreed, and so he had a guy come out, flash the ECM, and when he was done, Carlos took it out and drove it, and he found that the hesitation was gone, but he did think he felt a slight misfire, and so he grabbed another movie, made another movie of the engine data while he's driving it. Now, the customer has what he paid for, but Carlos wanted to just tuck that data away in case it came back. So as far as Carlos was concerned, the customer got what he paid for, and he said, we'll see you later, or maybe not, hopefully. Well, so here's the data he captured on the test drive, and we're going to look at it in a minute, but we want to do that at the very end here. So the hesitation was gone, and the check engine light didn't come on Carlos's test drive, so everybody thought it was fixed. Now, unfortunately, a few days later, the customer returned, and the problem is there again, or at least the check engine light is on. And so this time Carlos is saying, look, you have to leave this with me. And by the way, yes, you do have to pay me to diagnose it, because I'm not going to work for free. You've already done the Google thing. You've already done the YouTube thing. Now it's time to be professional about this. All right, so customer, said, all right, I'll pay for it and I'll leave it. And he went away. So Carlos, for reasons that I'll get into in a minute, decided to start this engine up lukewarm in his service bay and to see what he could find concerning the O2 sensors as far as their response to a lukewarm start. And so what he has here is, here's the total PID list he captured here. Now, there's times on some vehicles where you don't want to pick all the PIDs that are available because you slow the data rate down. But this car has a pretty quick data rate, so he didn't need to limit his PIDs like this, but he did. So this is what we had to work with. And so what he did is he's looking at these O2 sensors as they're heating up. And so here we have the engine started and the bias voltage is reading the same on all the sensors, and then you can see right around frame 650, 700, the O2 sensors start heating up and they start responding, and then after a period of time, all 4 sensors are reporting lean. Now, let's stop because, and now go to the other part of the story, which is Carlos got to here, and then he called me because he's not sure what to do. So I said, my first thought to him or thing I said to him was, look, did you get me some data to look at before I come to your shop, before I spend the time to do that? Do you have some data that you captured that you can give me? And if so, give me the ScanShare links. So it's a URL that ScanShare creates for you, and he sent it to me, and I looked over the data. So let me show you what I found, starting with his first capture. So remember, this came to him with the hesitation and the check engine light. He recorded the data, but he didn't really look at it. So now I'm going to look at it. So this is what I did. First thing I did is open the PID list to see, okay, what PIDs did he give me to work with? There are PIDs that I wish he had included that he didn't, but I figured, well, let's see what we can do with this. So what we're going to do is clear these codes, PIDs, and we're going to pick different ones. So here's engine speed, engine speed, mass airflow, and then let's look at the upstream sensors for bank 1 and 2. And so bring that into focus. All right, so this is a test drive, and there's some, a number of acceleration events. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, now this thing hesitates on acceleration, so I'm going to highlight just one of the periods of time where it's being accelerated. And so we have 4 PIDs, picked engine speed, mass airflow, bank 1, sensor 1, that's upstream, bank 1, and bank 2, sensor 1, that's upstream, bank 2. Now you can see here we are accelerating. He didn't give me TP, I wish he did, but he didn't. We can see the mass airflow increasing, and so we are accelerating. But note what is going on with the 2 upstream sensors is they're lean. And they shouldn't be. We are accelerating, we should not be lean. We should be either switching, rich lean, or we should be in power enrichment mode. Given the acceleration curve here, this is a light acceleration, so we should be in closed loop. We should not be seeing the O2 sensors this lean. So this explains his hesitation. So let's dig in further and see if we can find anything else going on here. And so what I'm going to do is I've got the engine speed, the mass airflow. I'm going to pick just the bank 1 upstream sensor, and I'm going to use that as a reference to, I'm going to assume it represents the other upstream sensor because we just saw it did. That gives me some more room here to look at stuff. And what I did is I looked at the adaptives, the long-term adaptives, and then the current adaptive cell. So we're going to highlight again an area of acceleration. I'm going to put my cursor where you can see RPM going up, you can see the mass airflow going up. The bank 1 upstream O2 sensor is showing lean. And now look at the adaptive. Bank 1 and bank 2 long-term adaptives are very negative. Now, bank 1 is a lot worse. So that means we are subtracting fuel from the base fuel calculation. This is a learned behavior. The ECM has learned to do this. And it shouldn't be doing this because it's lean and it's taking away fuel. So it knows it's lean and it's taking away fuel because in that adaptive cell, we've learned to do that. Now, an adaptive cell means the long-term fuel trim learned for that RPM load range. And so you see the blocks here because it's different cells. So over here, before we had a problem, we're in adaptive cell 5, and we're in adaptive cell 25, and then the long-term adaptation is only 5, which is nothing. And then over here, where we get moving and the oxygen sensor is no longer lean, we can see that we're in adaptive cell 13, and our long-term adaptation is 3. So that's all normal stuff, but what's not normal is this right here, where we are very negative on our long-term adaptive, and we're in cell 16. So this has learned to do this, and that's a problem. So let's now go to his next capture here, and this is where he had the ECM flashed, and then he took it for a test drive, and the hesitation was gone. But he did feel a slight misfire. So let's open our PID list and see what we have to work with. Here's misfire PIDs. All right, cool. All right, so let's clear that. And we're going to look at current misfire counts as he's looking at this. 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right. So we see here our misfire counts for cylinder 1 are going up. They hit about 35, then they go to 0, and then they go up. They go to 52, then they go to 0, then they go up to 45, and they go to 0. So if you don't know what that is, the current misfire counts are counted in 200 engine revolution blocks. So after every 200 engine revolutions, the counts add up and then they zero out. If there's enough counts, those counts get sent over to history counters, which we'll look at in a minute. But the thing here is this number is not going to 200, it's going to 52, which means we have roughly a 25% misfire. It's not a hard misfire. All right, so cylinder 1's got an issue. That's a misfire. It's not something to ignore. Number 2, nothing much happening there. Number 3, 28, so we're at about 12 or so percent misfire. Nothing to sneeze at, but it's not a big deal. Number 4, nothing happening there. Number 5, nothing happening there. Number 6, number 7, 7 is really not much. All right, so there's not a whole lot going on here, except for cylinder 1 and 3, and those are both on bank 1. So it shouldn't be like this, but we need some more information before we go any further with this. So let's clear our PIDs, and let's now look at the history counters. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. There's our history counters. And now look at this. All right, so our history misfire counters are telling a different story here. On cylinder 1, we have 41,000 misfire counts. That is substantial. Number 2, 348. That's nothing. That's overflow. Number 3, 32,000. That's substantial. Number 4, oops, wrong way to do it. Number 4, 351. That's probably just overflow. Number 5, we have 6,500 misfire counts. Number 6, not much. Number 7, 7,000 misfire counts. So, and then number 8, 121. So we have some serious misfire counts here, all on bank number 1. Now, remember, the first time he got this, he had a PO 300. That's probably where that came from. All right, so now let's go to his last capture here. And this is where the guy finally decided, okay, I'll leave the car with you. And he's starting this up on a lukewarm start, and he's looking at the O2 sensors to see, is there something going on? And so if you look at these things, right now where I have the cursor, we're reading bias voltage from the ECM, which is normal to be about 2.5 volts on this engine. And then as the engine runs and the O2 heaters do their work, you should start seeing the voltage come down as the sensor starts coming online and producing a voltage. And right around frame 1200 or so, you can see that all 4 sensors are warmed up and all 4 sensors are reading lean. But additionally, there's 2 other things going on here. One is it took a long time for these sensors, once they dropped and started working, it took a long time for them to start showing any activity. And you can see that happening right about here at around frame 1300. So let's zoom in here and notice something. So right around frame 1250 or so, the upstream sensor on bank 1 is starting to toggle. There's 0.94, that's rich. 0.18, that's lean. We have rich and lean, rich and lean. So this guy's toggling. And notice the upstream sensor for bank 2 here in red, it's just fixed high. So it's fixed rich, whereas bank 1, sensor 1 is toggling. And remember, that's the bank with all the problems with the misfires. And that's important because it seems to indicate we are probably have a lean misfire despite the fact that the sensor is switching. So what do we do here? I suggested to him that there's something wrong with these sensors. They are responding too slowly, and going back up to this first capture, there's something really wrong with this capture here where we have the hesitation and we have a minus 30 adaptation. There's something really serious going on here. Now, there's something else too. So let's look at the short-term adapts. And now I'm going to zoom in here on one acceleration. And notice our short-term adapts are normal. And notice that I picked the wrong capture to show you. Let's go to this last one. I believe it's here. It is here. Take these guys off. And I'm going to show you the, oops. So let's look at the short-term adaptives. This is the lukewarm start. Now, so both our upstream sensors, here's our bias voltage, and then the engine's running, the O2 heaters are running, the sensors start warming up, and right about here, first of all, right here, the sensor is starting to come online, and notice the first thing that happens is the fuel trim adaptive is subtracting big time on short term. And why is it doing that? Well, it's not happy with what it saw going on with the O2 sensors. They came online, and then the sensor voltage was too high, indicating rich, and so it's starting to take away fuel. And then a little bit later, before we have any toggling, we have the opposite thing going on. We are starting to add fuel like crazy. So, and remember, we had that learned adaptation up here. Let me bring this up. Okay, we had this learned adaptation that was giving us our hesitation. And so this is all coming together. We got O2 codes, closed loop codes, we have misfires. This is all looking like we got something going on with these O2 sensors. So what I suggested we do is we go buy one OE oxygen sensor, just one. Buy an upstream sensor. Buy an upstream sensor for bank one and get it from the dealer. Not because the dealer is a great place to buy parts. It's because they can look up the vehicle by VIN and get the right O2 sensors. And sometimes you can't get the right O2 sensor from an aftermarket source because they don't know how to look it up. So he did that, and I went away, and he wrote me back later and told me, whoops, there we go, and told me that he put the sensor in and he found something new. And so this is really interesting. So, all right, so let's look at the data here with the new sensor installed in Bank 1 Sensor 1. So we're going to look up these sensors. There's 1.1 and 1.2 and 2.1 and 2.2. All right, so now we're looking at the lukewarm start. He's fired this thing up. Now, Bank 1 Sensor 1, this top one in blue, this guy's been replaced. He's the OE sensor. And so the first thing he looks at is, okay, here's my bias voltage. They're all the same, 2.5. And then right around frame 600 or so, we can see that the OE sensor is already starting to respond. It's already starting to drop in voltage as the heater warms up the sensor. And very quickly, this sensor is online and working. So 0.86, that sensor is awake. It's producing a voltage, and it's slightly rich, which is what you'd expect with a cold, as we just enter closed loop. And very quickly, that Bank 1 Sensor 1 sensor starts switching like it ought to. And so we see a big difference between these sensors, and he's realizing that these other three sensors are not the correct sensors for this car. And so I suggested that he call up the customer and say, look, you want this fixed, you need to buy all four sensors. And so the customer agreed, and he put all four sensors on this car, or this truck. And after doing so, he took it out, he cleared the codes, took it out and drove it. It drove great. There were no misfires, no roughness. The check engine light didn't come on. The hesitation was gone. This thing was fixed. So I want to point out here, I'm not exactly a Chrysler expert, but I was able to help Carlos here pretty quickly. This wasn't a big diagnosis, but I was able to help him simply by looking at the data through the lens of how things should work generically with fuel control. Now, yes, some manufacturers and some makes can vary. Models can vary with the operational details, and there's some important things to know. But very often, I help guys fix cars by simply pulling up the data they captured themselves, not even knowing which PIDs to pick. But very often, you can diagnose these things by stopping, recording data, and sitting down and looking at it instead of doing what you see guys doing all the time, hunting and pecking and pulling and tugging and grabbing and whatnot. Just sit down and analyze the data. Don't try to do it while you're driving. That's nuts. But anyway, so this is fixed, and I'm done doing my favor for Carlos. The ScanShare case studies are done by local technicians, and they get paid for doing them. Carlos and Lincoln Doctor are probably the two most prolific here, but there's more. So I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough, this case study, and thank you.